Good evening, everyone, and welcome back. Tonight I was able to speak with Thom Cantrall. What an amazing man. Over the years, I've followed his research and I've heard his stories and seen a lot of his interviews, read a lot of his interviews. And I think the one thing that we forget in the Bigfoot world are the people behind the research, what their story is. And let me tell you, Tom has an incredible story. I consider Tom one of the legends in the Bigfoot community. This man broke ground, and his life experiences, the people he met along the way, his desire to know more about the subject from the early age of 14, when he first read an article in the newspaper about it. Tom went into the Navy for 9 years, worked on a submarine, but he never forgot his interest in Bigfoot and his desire to know more. Tom's journey is an incredible journey, but what's more incredible than that is the man behind the journey. And I only think it's fair to tell Tom's story and maybe share a few experiences along the way. But the man behind the story is truly a legend, and I hope you enjoy Tom's story, because it's long overdue, and he sure deserves to have it told. Good evening, and welcome to the Not So Perfect Bigfoot Show. Tonight, I just have the legend himself, Thom Cantrall. And I always get names wrong, Tom, so that's how I've always called you, Cantrall. Feel free to correct me.
It's close enough.
Thank you. And most people in the Bigfoot world, in the Bigfoot community, they know this man. He is absolutely a legend. And today we are here for Tom. And I think his story is as important as his research. And I hope that you guys sit back and enjoy it. This is Tom's time. And Tom, I'm going to hand it over to you, my friend.
Well, thank you. It's been a long journey to get where I am today. I started actually in 1958. On August 25th of 1958, a cat skinner returned to work in Northern California and found a series of tracks around his cat in the soft dirt there. And they were working out of camp, which means they went home on the weekends and stayed in camp all week. And this was a Monday morning. They came in, and here's this set of 16-inch tracks. Came down off the mountain, walked up the road around his machine, up around the next machine. And that wasn't the only time. It kept coming back and returning, and all through the fall of the year. And that it created a lot of interest, and it created some problems on the job too. It was hard to keep people working when these things were showing up and they didn't know what they were. They weren't always just tracks. There were times when he picked up an excavator tire, and threw that down in the canyon. He picked up a 24-inch culvert and threw that down in the canyon. A barrel of fuel another time. And the antics caught the interest of a biologist of the time, probably one of the world's foremost paleontologists. And he came in and investigated it. Oh, my heavens, don't get old. The name just went right out of my mind. It'll come back to me in a moment. But the fellow's cat skinner's name was Jerry Crew, and Jerry's family still lives in the Willow Creek, California area. And the Jerry was in town in Eureka, California on a weekend, and he had made some castings of these tracks. And Andrew Genzoli, who was the newspaper editor in Eureka, the Humboldt Times, got a hold of Jerry and asked him to come in for an interview. And that interview made the local paper. Then the wire services picked up on it. And I was 15 years old at the time, and I lived about 325 miles away from Eureka. And my hometown newspaper picked it up. And since I knew the area, we had family, friends that lived in the area, it caught my interest. And my dad had an ability to pique my curiosity anyway. And he showed me the article and asked me what I thought of it. And to be truthful with you, I was rather impressed. I had heard of the creatures, but I'd never seen that much physical evidence and firsthand reports before. And the newspaper article was well done. In that article, Andrew Genzoli called it the Bigfoot, and that's the first time that name appeared in print. And of course, it's become pretty popular since then, but that was the first time then. I was still in high school at the time, of course, and then graduated in 1961, joined the Navy, spent 9 years in the Navy. So I didn't have a whole lot of time to do much research in that period of time. I was on a submarine in the North Atlantic Ocean, and there are not many of them out there. But in 1968, the Navy gave me my choice of duty stations, and I chose the Polaris Missile Facility at Bangor, Washington, just outside of Bremerton, and was transferred there in April of 1968. And I lived up on the Olympic Peninsula. And that's haven for Sasquatch. I guarantee you that's haven for Sasquatch. That's when I could start my really in-depth studies. Prior to that, I just read everything I could get my hands on. And of course, the Patterson-Gimlin film had come out in that time period too. And that I researched that thoroughly, and since got to be very, very good friends with Bob Gimlin. He's still one of my best friends in the world, even though he's 92 years old and doesn't get around as well as he did anymore. But he's still just got the same sharp mind he always had. And it is. And I saw him just actually in October. We were together. They had brought the both of us together one night in Yakima, Washington, at the conference on the reservation there, and we had an absolute ball. Of course, we always have a good time. Maybe nobody else enjoys us, but we sure do. And yeah, so being 12 years older than me, he's my senior companion, but actually for like 35 years, from that time, from 1968 anyway, all the way to about 2008, 2009, somewhere in there, I was pretty much totally on my own. My family did not believe and were very derogatory. They just wanted to make a joke out of everything. And so I just never told them what I was doing. I went to college, started college when I got out of the Navy in 1970, and got my degree in logging engineering. So I was in the woods a lot. And although I never worked a day as an employee for a company as a logging engineer, I had my own logging company going by that time. I did do a lot of consulting work, property lines, and especially bridge site surveys in the state of Washington. If you're going to build a road that crosses a stream used by anadromous fish, that's fish that spawn in fresh water and go to salt water to live and then come back to spawn, like salmon, steelhead, smelt, or several others that do that. You have to have a permit from the state, and that permit requires a very detailed plan of what you're going to do. And so the companies, they had their own engineers, but they had more than they could do by doing the ones that were close to the road. So they hired me to do the ones that were 5, 6, 7 miles back in the timber. And there's nothing wrong with a Saturday walk 5 miles into old growth timber. You know, it's kind of a neat way to spend a day. And you go in and do all your measurements. And I learned early on that you do not hike out and sit down at your desk in the evening and start drawing it up and find out you've forgotten one measurement and have to hike back in the next day. That'll ruin your whole day. So what I would do is I'd sit down after I had everything measured and then do just a rough drawing, just a pencil drawing in my little Write in the Rain notebook. In that country, you do need Write in the Rain. I mean, it rains 220, 250 inches a year on the west side of the Olympic Peninsula. And if you had to pick what it was going to do on any particular day of the year, say rain, you'll be right most of the time. And so I would sit there and I would draw that up. You know, you have to measure the width of the stream, the depth of the stream, the flow rate of the water in the stream, the soil types, the bank types, and, you know, what there is for resources to do your bridge and your abutments and such like that. They had to have all of that ready. And so it was a half hour, 45-minute job to draw this up so that I knew I had what I needed. And it was at that time that I started seeing them. They would get curious as to why I was there. And I'd look up, I'd hear a sound, I'd look up, and here would be an eyeball peeking around a tree at me. And oh, hi there, you know. And there's a little whistle they do. It's just a little up-down whistle. Just pardon my whistle. It's not very good. Just a little up-down whistle. And for years, I didn't know that was them. I thought it was just a bird I hadn't classified yet. But I found out through one of Ron Moorhead's tapes. That's what he was doing, is saying, I've got him over here on my side. I'm watching him. And that's what they do. They said, watch me to see what I was doing, to make sure I wasn't doing something untoward. They get curious. And so I got to look where I'd look forward to that. And I was seldom disappointed. I mean, when you hike back in the timber and you're 4 miles off the road, cross a little stream you can step over, and there in the middle of it in the sandbar is a 16-inch track.
Wow.
You know somebody didn't come in there to hoax you. Hadn't been anybody there in 400 years. Why would they expect you to be there today? You know?
May I ask a question?
Certainly.
So all of your life you were looking for it, and reading the books, and, you know, going in the Navy, it was still such a part of something that was instilled in you.
Absolutely.
Standing out there that day, seeing that 16-inch track, how did you feel? What kind of emotions? Were you like that little kid, or?
Oh yeah, I was really excited. I actually had my own physical evidence, and after all of that study, and all the work I had done. I mean, I'd followed the crew incident and Tom Slick after them, and the paleontologist. His name slipped my mind, but he wrote articles that appeared in True magazine and Argosy magazine. And in those days, that was our internet. That's how information was passed. Magazines are kind of a thing of the past anymore, but they were very popular in those days. And and there were books. Ivan T. Sanderson. Okay, I told you his name would come back. He wrote those articles, and there were several books out. And then, like I say, the Gimlin, Patterson-Gimlin tape came out, and so there was a lot of stuff that was available at that time. The newspaperman in BC, again a name, and and I know the man personally too, before he passed. But don't get old. It's really not worth it. Okay. But I just read everything I could get my hands on. When we went to sea, we, like I said, I was on a submarine. I was on a Polaris submarine. And when we left the harbor, we reached a 100-fathom curve. That's where the water is 600 feet deep. We dove, and we didn't come back and didn't surface again for anywhere from 58 to 72 days later. So you had lots of time to read and study,
Wow.
you know. And I made 7 of those patrols. So I have got fairly used to it. I had a lot of time to read, and I just studied everything I could get my hands on. And to see that first track, wow, I finally have physical evidence of my own, and the little sightings I was seeing, it just all came together. It all made sense. Then, I think it was 1970, maybe 1971. My best buddy and I were we'd taken a day off. My logging job was shut down for fire shutdown, and it was a nice fall day. It was September, and so we decided we were going to go grouse hunting that day. Well, going grouse hunting is a euphemism for being in the woods when the elk are screaming, because I love trailing with the elk. And we'd go find, and these are the Roosevelt elk, the largest elk in North America. And they're probably half again the size of the ones that are back east, the Rocky Mountain or Yellowstone elk. A large Yellowstone bull will run 700 to 800 pounds, and an average Roosevelt elk will be 1,200 pounds. So they're again like half again the size, and huge things. But if you know how to do it and use a cow call, which is just a bark, and you can walk right along with them. I was right in a herd that day. We were in a herd of about 100 animals. It was a harem herd. A 5-point bull was the herd master, and you could walk along. I could touch a cow on I could reach out on the other side, touch a cow. They were they were with us all morning until we finally got them in a corner where they had to either go out in the open or come back by us, and they kind of just scattered. And that kind of ticked off the herd bull. He was upset. He was standing up on a promontory in the opening, just screaming his head off, bugling. And a younger bull walked up next to him. He just lowered his horns and rolled him down the mountain. I told Gary, I think it's time we left him alone now.
No doubt. But that's got to be magical.
Discretion being the better part of valor, Well, we got separated there, but we all often did. Gary was a forester too, so it wasn't like either one of us were going to get lost getting back to the truck. And so I just started walking back, and I took a little different route and saw a clearing up ahead. And clearing's not a particular area. Generally meant a water hole of some type. It was low country. And it's always interesting to see what's around a water hole. Mm-hmm. So I sneaked up very quietly and got the last big spruce tree. It was about probably 11 foot in diameter spruce tree. And sneaked around so I could peek around it. Turned out it wasn't a water hole at all. It was a little area of blown down timber. You get these microcosm weather systems, and the wind will whip in and it'll blow down a tree, and that blows out the room for another one to blow down. There's about 5 acres of blown down trees there.
Wow.
And feeding along the edge of it, there were 2 bears. I could see them. They were eating oyster mushrooms, what they're eating. I envied them. I love oyster mushrooms. And so I decided to sit and watch them for a minute quietly. The wind was in my face, so they couldn't smell me. The saying is, if a leaf falls in the forest, the eagle will see it and the owl will hear it, and the bear will smell it. Okay, their sense of smell is that good. So something like 900 times what ours is. However they measure that. So yeah, so I was sitting there watching, and all of a sudden, when I'm stood up to look around, it wasn't a bear. Didn't have a snout, had sloped shoulders. Yeah, it was not a bear. And I said, "Oh my heavens! Here's the first time I've had a chance to sit and watch a whole one, entirely. I can see his whole body. He was very obviously a male, and pretty quick the other one stood up. That was a female, and they were just having a ball eating oyster mushrooms, and they were moving towards me, and I probably watched them a good 20 minutes, and they got within probably 35 yards of me, something like that. And the wind shift, I could feel it. A gust of wind hit the back of my neck, and when it did, the four eyes were on me just like that, pop. So I just stepped away from the tree so that I'd see who it was, and not be afraid. And when the wind hit him, he stepped back and pushed her towards the standing timber. And as she did, she reached out and picked up a baby and put it on her chest. And he just held on. And then she walked back in the timber. And I audibly, I said, "Thank you for sharing your family with me today. Thank you so very much." And he turned back and he looked at me again. And I swear he nodded his head at me. I really swear to today. And that's been a long time, but I swear he nodded his head at me before he turned and walked back in the timber. And that was the first time that I had the opportunity to see just what they were and how they were built and how they moved and their anatomy. It was absolutely fascinating. And of course, then I turned and walked back to the truck. Got there just about probably 10 minutes after my partner had, and he had the coffee pot on and had some fresh coffee. But yeah, that was an absolutely fantastic experience.
May I ask something?
Certainly.
And I really hate to interrupt you when you're on a roll.
Oh, that's right. I can handle questions.
What struck me the most about that, him standing up and pushing her toward the wood line.
Mm-hmm.
That is such it's protective, but so human-like. And I do believe they're human.
Yeah,
but
they are.
That tells me more than anything I'll ever read in a book. Just that one gesture that they have family units. The man,
Absolutely.
even with them, is protecting his mate. When
Mm-hmm.
you were standing there, when you stepped out of that tree, were you afraid or were you confident that that was the right thing to do to give them a
I was
piece
very confident. I had been, like I say, reading since 1958, and I'd never seen what I would call a credible account of anyone ever being attacked by one. Now, if you're a wild species that does not want to be encountered, does not want to be found, the last thing you're going to do is attack the majority species. Okay, that's going to bring them on you like white on rice. You just don't do that. And so, no, I didn't have any qualms at all. I'd never had any fear of them in any form, any shape. And I've had them, even hold my hand. So, yeah. But
Wow.
yeah, I've attended and actually on Tuesday will be the 9th birthday. I attended the birth of twins in BC, Canada, from a clan that we worked with up there. And yeah, it'll be 15th of January, 2015. Uh, yeah, it was
That's
wonderful.
incredible.
Hmm.
I imagine as your story flows, we're going to get there.
Hmm.
When you got back to the truck, did you immediately tell your friend, or is it something you kind of
No,
held
I
up?
never told him anything. He didn't believe at all, and they just didn't show themselves to him, and he just I just never said anything. Uh, I never even, my wife. I never even told her because of the they just like I said they just wanted to make fun of it, and even then I knew that they deserved more respect than that. And respect is a huge thing, and there's too little of it in this world. Um, we need more respect not only for where we live, but we also need respect for one another and for ourselves. There's so many people who have no respect even for themselves. Just as an aside, I had a fellow tell me one day, I don't trust anybody. Nobody's going to tell me anything because I won't believe them unless I see it myself. I said, well, that tells me one thing about you. You're a liar. And you justify it by saying everybody is. That's the difference with me is I've trusted my life to other people. You are on a submarine without trusting your life every day to 130 other people that they do their job, they do it right. Okay. And if
Yeah,
you're in a combat situation, it's even more so. Okay. If you can't trust the man around you, you're in bad shape. So what I do, if I can't trust you, if I can't believe you, you're not in my camp. Period. Okay.
that's
That's
good.
why. Yeah. The group I work with now, Barb Shoot, Barb, Squatching with Barb and Gabby, Barb and Goldie now. Implicitly, do they see the same things I do? No, 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 they don't. Do I believe what they're describing? I believe very much that they see what they're talking about. Would I see the same thing? Maybe not. But we all see it through our own eyes. And we do that with our own experience. And I tell people, what I say, you may not believe, you may not understand. That's fine. I don't care. It's no skin off my nose whether you do or not. I'm just telling you what I saw through my eyes. Okay. All I ask is respect enough to rather than list me as a hoaxer, as some groups have, is to just write it down and keep it in your mind until you have the same experience or have a similar experience. Because if you stay with these long enough and you're acceptable to them, you will.
Wow.
Dr. Jeff Melder, Jeff and I have a very strange relationship. Uh, we were both at the Sasquatch Summit in Ocean Shores, Washington, a couple of years ago. And after the thing, I went up and shook hands with him. I said, well, Jeff, we did it again. We disagreed with 60% of what one another said and can still shake hands, go home friends. You know,
That's
and,
mature.
yeah, I says it's just a matter of respect, and, I says your problem is you just haven't seen enough.
So,
Until you've done the Jane Goodall, Diane Fossey thing, where you've sat and watched them, you don't understand what they are or how they work, and that's important.
so
Jeff, I know. He says you're sitting there talking. He says I'm disagreeing with you, but you're so darn articulate, and your arguments are so good. I find my head going up and down. I tell Jeff, listen to your head.
listen to your head. That's awesome. Well, isn't that what it takes? Different minds, different opinions.
Isn't that what
We need that.
isn't that what science is about?
Yes.
You one person comes up with develops a theory, and somebody else tests it. That's why I share everything. I haven't hidden anything. I had somebody else came up with a different avenue to something that I preach consistently, and it's an anatomical constant called intermembral index, and that's the ratio of your arm length to your leg length. And it's taught in Anatomy 101 in every college in the country, okay? And in humans, in each species, it's a constant. In humans, it's a ratio of 72. In chimpanzees, it's 104. Their arms are longer than their legs. And in gorillas, it's like 122, something like that. Sasquatch is 84.
Wow.
If you see a picture and you want to know if it's a human in a suit, measure the arm from the shoulder to the wrist and the leg from the hip to the ankle. Divide that and multiply times 100 just to get rid of decimal points, and that'll tell you the intermembral index. Okay.
I did not know that. You have educated me, sir.
Well, it's one of the things I do. Well, there's a person on that does debunking of films and this sort of stuff, and he's developed PDMI or something like that. He uses basically the same idea. He measures the arms, the legs, and the back. And I made mention of it one time that hey, that reminded me that it could be used for that type of identification. So I went back and took things like the 4th of July footage and the Memorial Day footage and Freeman's footage and the Patterson-Gimlin footage. And they're all in that 84 range, every one of those. Okay? You can't make a human body do that. Because if you put an arm extender on, that's the first thing I hear. Oh, just put an arm extender on. No, then your forearm is longer than your upper arm. They're not in balance anymore. Okay? The only way you can do it is add 2 inches here between the elbow and the wrist and 2 inches between the elbow and the shoulder. And I'm not going to allow that,
Yeah.
That's the same thing in the legs, in order to get that. I have to add 4 inches to my arms to go from 72 to 84 IM. Okay, and it just can't be done. And if you want to know the rest of the problems, read Bill Munn's book, When Roger Met Patty. He goes into it, and he has a series of YouTube videos that describes the same thing on how that could not possibly be a suit. Even if you could make a suit, you could not find a human being that would fit in it. And he goes on to prove why. And Bill Munns ran the school in Hollywood for creature making. Okay, I think he knows something about making costumes.
I remember that.
Yeah.
So going back to the Patty, if you don't mind.
Sure.
When that come out, that lit a fire under you, didn't it?
It did. Oh yeah. Oh my yes. That was finally good evidence. And I didn't see it for some time because I was at sea when it happened. So it was way the next summer before I'd heard about it, and looked at that. Oh yeah. And probably the first thing I did when I got to the West Coast was to look up Bob and meet him. And what a wonderful guy that guy is. Just one of the true men in life. And to be attacked and vilified as much as he has been, it's just absolutely horrendous. He's just, and get me started on that.
The community can be very cruel.
It can, and it's mostly from people that have no idea what they're talking about.
Exactly.
They sit behind their computer and make these decisions of who's right and who's wrong based on how it fits their ideas. Yeah. Instead of going out and getting the facts. Well, that's a different story, I suppose. But Yeah,
The
and
movie.
at that time, I came up with another idea. This like 73, I think I did this one. I had a set of tracks, and I wondered what happened. I think it was 74. What had happened? Was walking in to do a bridge set, and the water had been very high over the banks of the river, Dickey River, and so I had to wait till the water went down. And this is the first day I could get in it. I was hiking in. I came around a big down log, and there's a large male standing there eating huckleberries. And
Wow.
I was about probably 12, 15 feet from him. And I just said, "Well, hi there, big guy. How are you today?" And he turned and looked at me, and his eyes went about that big, And he turned around and just walked away, just like Patty did. Just turned and walked away. Well, here I had the absolutely perfect chance. I could measure my footprints alongside his footprints, see how much mine sunk in, as compared to him. I didn't have to worry about whether it had gotten drier or wetter or everything because it was at the same time. And I did. And I learned some things there. And so that got me to thinking, could I determine more facts from their footprint? I knew that I could determine their height. Again, another anatomical constant. The same for all primates. Our height is 6.5 times the length of our foot. Now, does
Right.
that everybody that has a 10-inch foot is going to be 5 foot 5 inches tall? No, that's going to put you in the center of the bell curve. And then you're going to have the standard deviations from that. But that's the criteria. I have a good friend here where I live. Her son has size 12 shoes, and he should have been 6 foot 5 inches tall from the length of his foot. He's 5'8". and, so there are exceptions, but so I knew that 6.5 times the length of the foot will tell you the height, and it's the same with them. And I've done enough of that to be able to tell that. What I call my teacher is 9 foot 3 inches tall, and he has a 17-inch foot, and that's a perfect 6.5 to 1 ratio. And I have castings of his foot right here in my apartment, and so I get thinking about that. And what I did is I devised a tub with a foot on it, where I could change the foot, and then I could load that tub with weight and see how much weight it took to sink it into the ground at the same depth as the track. Okay, that would tell me. I was pretty good I bought a lot of cattle at auction, so I could judge weights pretty well just by looking. And I was in the ballpark, but I wanted something more, so I started with that. And then I took the track and I used a planimeter, which is an engineering tool for measuring around uneven figures. And I could figure out the square inches in the foot. Now, if you watch their walk, they don't walk like we do. They use what's called a compliant gait. Their whole foot sits down flat. Then as they come forward, the mid-tarsal breaks, and then their weight goes on the front half of the foot. With us, we land with a very heavy heel strike. So the depth of our foot is always deepest at the back end, not at the front end. Okay. So they land with a flat foot. All their weight is distributed evenly. That's the part you use. Then they come forward onto the front half, leaving the back half as the less deep of the two. Again, a way to tell if a track casting is fake, look at it. The front end better be deeper than the back end.
Okay. Wow, I did not know that.
Okay, if it's not, now there are some, it could be due to strata, rocks, something like that. But generally speaking, if the strata is smooth, same front and back, the front end has to be deeper than the back end. Otherwise, it's fake. It's ours. It's a human trick. Also, and if you can see the arches of the feet, of course, that's obvious. But the first thing the people that make fake tracks find out, it's very tough to make tracks. Why? Because you made yourself a set of snowshoes. Actually, what you're doing, you're taking your weight, and that's what I was getting to, by measuring that foot, estimating his weight, dividing that weight by the square inches of his foot. You can get a pounds per square inch figure. Well, I wanted that accurate. So I would measure the foot, get the square inches. I knew the length. I could divide that square inches by the length. That would give me the average width of the foot. And I found that's 40% of the length.
Wow.
If you want square inches of the foot, take the length of the foot times 40% and multiply that times the length, and it'll give you the area in square inches. Okay, that's simple. Now we've got the area. Let's find the weight and work backwards from that. So I took my tub, find a track, and I'd use my tub, load it up, then weigh the sandbags and find out what the actual weight was to make it sink that deep. Okay, measure that divide that by the square inches. Came out at 7.5 so often, it was just unreal.
Wow.
Okay. So now, give me a track, 15 inches long. Square inches, 15 inches times 0.4 is 6, times 15 is 90. 90 square inches in that track. Okay, 90 square inches times 7.5, 565 pounds. So from that track, I know he's 96 inches tall, and 6.5 times 15, 96 and a half, and 98 inches tall. That's what it is. And pardon me if I'm doing math in my head here, but and he weighs 525 pounds. Yeah, just from the length of the track. So that's very helpful to know.
Well, do you find the stride is as important as the track? I mean,
pardon me?
Together. Do you find the stride is as important as the track? I know it goes together.
Absolutely. If and that's one thing people don't do enough of. They find one track, and that's fine if you want a footprint, but it doesn't tell you much about the being. You got to look for that extra track, and most people look too close. I'm 6 foot when I could get around, and normally I'm 6 foot 4 inches tall, and my step, not my stride. My step was 30 inches. Now, being an engineer, that's one of the things I taught myself to do, is to be able to pace. I could pace a property line a mile and be within 50 feet at the end just by counting my steps as I went. Wow. Okay, so I had a calibrated step, and it was 30 inches. Patty's average is 49 inches.
That's from hill to hill.
Yeah.
Wow.
One step. Yeah.
And that's
one stride, which is left foot, right foot, left foot. For me, is 60 inches. For her, it's about 100 inches, a little over 8 feet.
Wow. And you can't fake that.
No, you can't fake that, and you can't. I have a rope, and what I did is I took flagging, and it's a 50-foot length of rope, and I tagged it every step that Patty made, because they had that information, and I stretched that out and have people try to walk it. It is so much fun to watch. Yeah, it is so much fun to watch. And invariably, when they try to do the look back, they fall over, fall out of line. I've never had anybody be able to do it in 20 years now.
But it also, someone that does not believe and looks at the film, then look at you putting the flags out, it also plants the seed, what if this is real?
Yeah.
When you look it from that approach. So that's really a good approach.
Yeah, it is. It's a good demonstration, and I've used it quite a lot. Matter of fact, the ropes right over here in my bookcase is ready for next time. Yeah.
Awesome. So as you progressed after that day, eventually you almost started making friends with them.
Yes, I did. But that really happened. Oh, it happened in the late 70s the first time. And that was in Northern California. I had taken a job I'd taken a job to run their road building crew. And they had some problems with the Forest Service on a couple of their sales, and they weren't going to be building as much road as they thought. So asked me if I would take over for the Bullbug, the lead cutter and timber cutter. And I said, yeah, I can do that for a while till things open up. And that was a terrible job. All I did was keep good workers from working. I'd show up and they'd stop to talk, and, but I was we had a logging job that was remote from our mill, and our mill was right on the border, California Oregon border, just into California. I lived in Oregon, but drove it down every day, and I'd have to drive over to that interior logging job at least once a week, sometimes twice a week, sometimes 3 times a week, and it was about a 4.5-hour drive to get there. So if I'm going to move a set of cutters at 6 in the morning, I have to leave before breakfast to get there, about 2 in the morning actually. And finally, we opened up what's called the Go Road, Gasky, California to Orleans, California. And at that time, it was built and paved on both ends to left about, I don't know, maybe 20 miles in the middle that was not built. It was just a cat trail. But with the 4-wheel drive, I could get through okay. And I was going over early one morning on that road. It was May 20th, 21st, somewhere right in there of 1978. And driving over, I got right to the top. There was still what we'd done. We had taken a D7 cat in the west end, the Gasky end, all as far as we could get, and then unloaded him and let him push snow off the road until he got to the the paved road on the east end, and we picked him up there and took him off the road job. So he made us a road through the snow. Well, when I came through, it looked like bear tracks coming down the hill and crossing the road and down into the mountains. So as I was driving, on the road, I got up to him and I stopped to look, see what kind of bear it was, how big a bear it was. It wasn't a bear. It was a set of bipedal tracks. And I wanted to follow him then, but I had an appointment with the Forest Service, and you just don't keep a $2 million logging job going because you want to go chase Sasquatch, Although I really wanted to, So I just hung some flagging there so I'd be able to find it on my way back. I was going to stay over, and I knew I had to meet the Forest Service early the next morning. Well, early for them, late for me. I got to sleep in, but I stayed in our camp there, and then as soon as I was done with them, I came back. It was about 11 o'clock or so when I got back there. Hid my truck out and started on the trail, and I caught up with them. Got down into the bottom of the canyon that night, and I think I was on Blue Creek. It was the next ridge over from Bluff Creek where Patty was built. Okay, then it was next drainage over, and so I found there was a big old hollow fir tree. There were 3 of them, big hollow with burned out bases. And I said, what a great, don't have to pitch a tent even, just throw a sleeping bag in there. And I noticed these long black hairs in there. as I was making my bed camp, and I walked upstream a couple of 100 yards to make sure there wasn't a dead deer laying in the stream before I took water out of it, and made my coffee, and just sitting there in the evening, and all of a sudden I heard this call from one ridge. It's a, ooh, and then from the other ridge, ooh. Oh, we've got company tonight. And it kept getting closer and closer and closer and closer. Pardon me. And eventually, and it's just dusky. It's dusk, but I can still see, you know. And I see these shapes. Pardon me.
You're fine. You're fine. I think I'm going to take a drink too. Cheers.
And I can see these shapes moving. And as it got darker, they got closer and closer and closer. So what I did is I sat with my back to the fire so that I wasn't looking at the fire and I could see better into the night. And I watched them. And it was a trio. Again, it was a male and a female and a youngster. And as they were, the youngster would come up and he'd hit the tree that I was in, and his mother would, and he'd run back. And the male was trying to talk to me. He was trying to communicate with me. I'm just sure he was. I mean, we did everything in the world, but he did not use telepathy. Now, that raises a question in my mind. Is it that they cannot all use telepathy? Perhaps only a certain class can? Or was I just not receiving? I'm not sure. Or maybe he didn't do it very well. At any rate, but he used. You've heard you've heard Ron Moorhead's tapes. That's what we were doing. He was just talking up a storm, but I couldn't follow it. And this went on till probably 2:33, 3:30 in the morning. We're sitting there doing that. Finally, I told him, this guy's got to get some sleep. I got work to do tomorrow. And I crawled back in when I woke up again. They were gone. But I packed up and left. A nice set of tracks there and everything. And that was a real eye opener. I don't know what I did to myself here.
You're fine. Take your time. Do you find that it's hard to leave them once you have a?
Yeah, it is. It is. But that was, get to sit and watch them and interact with them. That was fantastic. That was absolutely great. And that was, like I say, in 1978. And then in 1980, 1980. Yeah, I think it was 1980. I left that area, returned back to the Pacific Northwest, and had some really, we went right back to where we were when I got back up on the Olympic Peninsula. And it's just the same thing over and over and over again. And that howl, let me tell you about that. Again, this is another time I got in trouble with a researcher because he slowed that howl down. And I was amazed at what's on it. You slowed that thing down enough. If you remember Ron Moorhead's tapes, when Scott Nelson was working with them, he had to slow them down 50% before he started getting the morphine streams off them, before he could hear syllables. Okay. Wow. Same thing with that howl. When you slow it down enough, it morphs back into language. It's just you can see the waveform for language. As a matter of fact, in my last book, Sasquatch the Proof, I have the pictures of that in there. And so when I saw that researcher do that? I said, again, one person advances it, the other person tests it and proves it. So we had a set of howls that were recorded down in northern Oregon, north central Oregon, in the Blue Mountains, done in one of our camps down there. And I took that one, did the same thing to it, came out exactly the same. And this person got he was threatening me with lawsuits for plagiarism and everything. Turns out that he sells subscriptions to his site. He didn't want anybody else. He's not in it for the science. He's in it for the money. And yeah. And he's pretty well known person too. I won't go into personalities or names or anything, but it did the same thing. It proved his hypothesis, and did it with a totally different set of audio. He told me, he says, "You can't afford the software that I have." I said, "No, I don't have the software you have, but what I had worked." And no, I can't do the things with it you did with it, where you could still hear it at that speed, but it's still, I got the waveform of it, and that's what I wanted. And and so basically what they're doing, that howl, they're talking to one another over long distance.
So to us, when we're in the woods and I've heard it a few times, but when you're in the woods and you're hearing a howl, sometimes it sounds like a train. But if you slowed that down, you would hear syllables in it. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, that's what you're hearing. I have in my book, Sasquatch the Proof, I've got that one slowed down, an example of the Moorhead Berry tapes slowed down, and my own voice, and they're all the same thing.
Wow. So we are going on an hour, and we're going to conclude part 1 and come back with part 2.
Okay.
So do you want to take a break, or do you want to pick up where we left off?
I don't have a full hour left now, so probably we'd best pick it up another time.
I find this really fascinating, and I like the fact that we're taking our time with this, because you have so much to tell, and your story is so incredible, and I want to make sure I get it right, because to me, you have earned that.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I'm totally enjoying myself.
Well, isn't it great when it's just a converse or like a chat, not just like a hardcore interview, blah blah?
Yeah, because I like questions. I can handle questions, so that's no problem at all. And yeah, I do like to tell a whole story.